A steel plaque goes up where the roses used to breathe, the tap of the drill cutting through morning birdsong. My hands are torn for hauling roots all night, dirt packed into every scrape. The plaque bears my grandmother's name in cold letters, a name Karen tried to erase before sunrise. The air smells like wet soil and apology. I can hear a camera recording behind me, the crisp scratch of an HOA clipboard against polyester, as if rules could smother memory. 2 months earlier, I unrolled seed envelopes from a shoebox marked Sanctuary and poured out a storm of history. Milkweed, coneflower, yarrow, the old native chorus my grandmother swore kept our block alive during ration lines and empty shelves. I laid the first bed by the cracked walkway and felt the ground shift, like the house exhaled. That was the day Karen marched up with bylaws like a script carved in stone. Decorative turf only, she said without blinking. Uniformity makes peace. Her voice clipped each syllable like head shears hunting for anything that dared to be itself. The first notice arrived the same afternoon, bright paper shouting fines that grew by the day. No edibles, no native beds, no rocks taller than a shoe. As if stones had heights and pollen could be arrested. Neighbors watched through blinds. Car doors paused mid-close. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I kept planning, because grief needs something to do with it, Hans. I staked a trellis and whispered my grandmother's weathered sayings, the ones that used to sound like superstition until food prices made them prophecy. At dusk, the yard smelled alive, and that made it dangerous. Karen paced the sidewalk, measuring sight lines, tapping flags where she wanted cuts. The streetlights blinked on, and her volunteers appeared with tape and clipboards, faces tight with the relief of belonging to a rule. Leo from next door rolled by on his board, phone balanced, gaze curious, the kind of curious that turns into proof. He asked if I minded him recording. I told him to get the whole truth, the parts no one frames for the newsletter. By the third notice, I couldn't sleep. I walked the yard under a silver sky and nudged a stepping stone that didn't sit right. The shovel rang on something that wasn't pipe and wasn't luck. A hard edge hidden under clay. Old metal where roots braided themselves into knots. My breath fogged and vanished. I pried at the corner until my palms stung, and a line of brass winked up like a secret that had waited on a better century. I sent a photo to the city's historic inbox, subject line shaking with dirt and hope. Auto-reply chirped back in the dullest voice a machine could manage. Received. Someone would read it when the calendar allowed. The HOA clock ticked louder. Karen posted a reminder about compliance to the neighborhood forum, public wrist slap with my address humming underneath. The comments split like lightning down the spine of a storm. Free the bees, one said. Rules are rules, said another, wearing the comfortable armor of someone who has never needed exceptions. The fines jumped. A notice slid under my door at midnight and snagged on the rug like a tripwire. Noncompliance will result in removal. A phrase so calm it felt violent. I answered by digging. Each shove of the blade lifted more of the buried plate. Letters appeared through a skin of soil. Hey. No, older, the metal pitted but proud. I brushed it with my sleeve, mud streaking my forearm like war paint I didn't ask for. Leo appeared at the fence as the sun burned through a low seam of cloud. He said the stream was live and the chat was asking why a front yard had to look like a brochure. I let them see my shaking hands, the brass gleam, the seed envelopes smudged with thumbprints from someone who kept this block fed when trains ran on curfews and sugar was a rumor. Part of me hated that strangers watched. A bigger part understood that silence is a luxury rules enjoy. If this fight lives in you, hold it with me. Tap like so the story stays visible when the next notice arrives. Subscribe so you can stand with us when the city answers, and leave a comment with your city so we can map every place memory is being pruned to the curb. I need more than dirt under my nails. I need witnesses. At noon, Karen returned in a fresh blazer, a smile polished to a warning. A contractor's truck rumbled behind her, orange lights blinking their own verdict. She held a sleeve of papers like a priest clutching ritual. Emergency removal order. The words drifted over the yard and left frost where they landed. Deputy Collins followed, jaw tight, eyes apologizing for a system built to value symmetry over story. He read the order, checked the bylaw, and told me his hands were bound. His voice carried the weight of a man who hated being used like a hammer. Neighbors gathered in little islands of concern, some of them strangers until this morning, some of them pretending to check their mail twice. Mr. Calloway, the veteran 3 doors down, stood very straight and watched the plate glint at the edge of the hole. Denise from across the street gripped her porch rail until her knuckles went white. She wouldn't meet my eyes, but she didn't go inside either. That felt like the first crack in a dam. I stepped between the bobcat and the first bed, mouth dry, chest loud. I said I had contacted the city historian and there might be an ordinance older than every lawn on this block. The crew chief looked at Karen. Karen looked at the papers. The engine coughed like a warning animal. My phone vibrated in my pocket with the world's most meaningless comfort. Auto reply. Received. The ground waited, pulse steady, as if roots could hold their breath. The crew lowered the blade until it kissed the grass like a goodbye someone was trying to make gentle. A single bee wandered the milkweed, unaware of bylaws or boards or fines stacked like bricks. Collins lifted a hand as if he wanted to stop the whole century from happening again. He didn't lower it. Time did that for him. Steel scraped stone. The sound sliced through every conversation on the block. Leo's camera shook. Karen's face didn't. The plate flashed once, a stubborn star refusing to be paved. The crew chief squinted, checked the order again, then nodded to the operator. The bobcat lurched forward, teeth bared for the first bite, and the garden held still the way a body does when it knows the first cut is coming. The bobcat lunges, and the street flinches. Collins throws his palm up like a stop sign you want to believe in. He reads the line numbers again, the emergency clause Karen loves like a hymn. The crew idles, exhaust drifting over milkweed that doesn't know it is about to be judged. Karen plants herself at the property line, binder pressed to her ribs. She points to timestamps she highlighted in neon, proof that procedure is on her side and time belongs to her. Neighbors collect along the curb, a hush with a pulse. Leo's stream count climbs and climbs, little hearts floating up the screen like breath in cold air. I cut across the grass and kneel in front of the coneflower bed I built the night grief would not let me sleep. The soil is warm from the engine. I slide my hands under the roots and lift. Something scrapes my knuckle, not stone, not pipe, a corner too square for chance. I clear the dirt with my fingers, and a rusted tin shines through like an eyelid trying to open. Collins leans in, jaw set. The crew chief watches with the patience of a man paid by the hour to defeat meaning. Karen warns that interfering with removal is a separate violation. The words land on my shoulders and slide off into the earth that remembers me better than any notice will. The tin resists, then lets go with the soft gasp of old seals breaking. Inside, paper breathes for the first time in decades. The top letter is thin and strong, edges curled like dried petals. A name blooms from the page, my grandmother's careful hand, the year 1943. She writes about a canteen garden feeding train crews and families that arrive at night with nothing but a suitcase and a vow to keep going. She lists plantings like a roll call. She thanks a botanist with a name I know only from footnotes and rumor. I slide the next sheet free, and a pencil map maps my yard like a confession. 5 small rectangles drawn across this block, little stars inked in their corners, a number scrawled beside mine that makes my breath catch. 4. The same number stamped faintly on the brass plate in the hole. The pieces reach for each other in the space between my hands. Leo points his lens into the tin, and the chat tilts from jokes into attention. People start tagging local reporters nobody expects to answer on a Saturday. A comment flies past from 3 towns over swearing there used to be a plaque on their corner that vanished one winter no one wants to talk about. Other neighborhoods wake up. The story starts picking doors. I email photos to the city address I begged last night. Subject line louder, attachment shaking the upload bar. Dr. Harlow's name autofills like luck. The reply pings back with the same chill. Out until Monday. I hold a phone like a stone and feel the math of days I do not have. Last night comes back in a rush I didn't invite. The hiss at the fence. The line I found sliced clean where it feeds the soaker hose. The rose bush bent like a caught wrist. The way the dark pressed against the window, asking me to pretend I didn't hear. I stood in the kitchen with the light off and learned the shape of fear by its breath. If your hands have ever shaken for something simple and right, stand with me now. Tap like so this doesn't disappear under newer noise. Subscribe so you're there when the answer lands. Drop a comment with your city and the plants your elders trusted. We are not just defending a yard. We are defending memory in a neighborhood that forgot its own reflection. Collins asks the crew for 30 minutes. The supervisor in the orange vest reads the order and shrugs the way a man shrugs when he has learned to live with the sound of other people's losses. Karen folds her arms, eyes bright with a certainty that feels like winter. Procedure wins when no one else is brave enough to. I slide the letters back into the tin and hold the map flat with the heel of my hand so it will not curl back into hiding. Denise stands on her porch as if one step will crack something ancient. Mr. Calloway adjusts his cap and stares at the brass edge in the dirt like he is counting backwards to a day he never told anyone about. The crew chief nods. The engine climbs. The blade drops into the first bed, and the earth lets out a sound that slices me open. Roots pop like knuckles, soil coughs, milkweed tilts with a stunned grace that breaks my chest. The bobcat pushes forward, and the garden gives way the way a body does when it has no choice. I pull clumps free as they pass, raking for anything that will carry a name to the other side. The shovel hits something deeper, older, a ring of stones that do not sit like decoration but stand like a promise. The machine jolts, recovers, leans back into its hunger. Leo's camera stutters as if the signal itself is afraid to watch. Karen narrates to her phone, crisp, rehearsed, the soothing cadence of authority murmuring that order is mercy. The crowd sways with each scoop, finds click invisibly upward on a ledger that has never touched this kind of weight. Collins bites down on a word he cannot say in uniform and steps closer to me, boots nearly in the trench, as if proximity could count as help. The shovel catches glass, and the day spits blue light for a breath. The sound is a tiny bell under the roar, a warning or a welcome, I can't tell. Soil slides, stones show their edges, and the operator raises the arm for a heavier bite. The blade swings, wet dirt streaking the steel, and comes down again toward the circle the ground tried to keep hidden. The blade catches the edge of the circle, and the machine shudders. A muffled crack echoes through the trench as a glass bottle splits, spilling its contents into the churned soil. The crew pauses, curiosity breaking through their practiced indifference. I step forward before Karen can speak, brushing clods away from a fragment of curved glass still holding the ghost of a photograph inside. I lift it gently, dirt clinging to the image. Sepia shadows emerge. My grandmother, younger than I've ever seen her, shoulder to shoulder with women in aprons, their faces lined with the resolve of people who had nothing to spare but gave anyway. At the far right stand the tall man I've only read about, Gideon Mays, the botanist who, in the middle of a segregated city, taught Victory Gardens how to feed everyone. Behind them, on a handmade sign, words barely survive the years. Victory Garden number 4. The air thickens. Leo leans in with the lens, the chat flooding with hearts, shocked emojis, and names of towns where similar gardens once stood. Someone drops a link to a wartime ordinance protecting such gardens. The thread lights up as if the internet itself remembers. Karen's jaw tightens, but she keeps filming, the HOA crest glinting in the corner of her clipboard. The operator waits for the call to continue. Collins steps into the trench, lifts the brass plate clear of the last stone, and wipes it with his sleeve. The engraving is shallow but defiant. Victory Garden Registry, 1943, number 4. The plate hums in my hands like it's been waiting for someone to notice it still breathes. Karen snaps that registry or not, the HOA has jurisdiction. Collins meets her eyes and tells her he'll be calling City Code Enforcement's historic liaison before the next inch is dug. His voice doesn't shake. For the first time, Karen's gaze wavers. Leo swings the camera toward me. I hold a plate and the photograph high enough for the street to see. I tell them these are not just artifacts. They are proof that this dirt fed people when shelves were empty and trains ran at night without lights. The yard isn't a violation, it's an heirloom. The crowd murmurs, a sound that feels like roots spreading under concrete. A message flashes across Leo's screen from a reporter he follows. Send me everything now. The chat surges with encouragement, offers of legal aid, stories from viewers whose grandparents worked similar gardens. Strangers begin typing the names of plants their elders grew in hidden corners behind uniform lawns. If this matters to you, let it grow. Tap like so more eyes see it before the next blade falls. Subscribe so you can stand here with us when the city answers. Drop a comment with your city and your oldest garden memory. We will stitch them together into something too big to tear out. The crew stands back as Collins dials. Karen flips through her binder with frantic precision, searching for the clause that will undo what's just been unearthed. Denise edges down her porch steps, her gaze fixed on the photograph in my hand, lips moving with words I can't hear. Mr. Calloway stands so still he looks carved from the same stone that ringed the plate. Collins ends the call, exhales once, and says there's a temporary stop order until the city's historian can review the site. Karen protests, voice sharp, but Collins simply says, "Not today." The machine powers down. For the first time all morning, the air is quiet enough to hear the soft drone of a bee still working the last untouched milkweed. The street exhales as though it had been holding its breath for years. Neighbors drift away in small clusters, some stopping to look at the plate and photograph before leaving. Leo keeps streaming, narrating in a voice steadier than I expected for someone his age. He asks me what happens next. I tell him I don't know, but for now, the garden will see another sunrise. That night, I can't sleep. I leave the lights off and sit in the dark with a photograph propped against a jar of seeds on the table. Outside, footsteps pass slow along the sidewalk, then stop. The sound of something small hitting the porch, metal on wood. I open the door to find a single rusted dog tag, warm from the night air, lying in the dust. The name stamped into it matches the soldier from my grandmother's letters. Somewhere down the street, a shadow turns the corner and is gone before I can call out. The dog tag rests heavy in my palm, a fragment of a larger story the ground isn't done telling. I close my fist around it and listen to the night, feeling the garden's pulse under the silence. At dawn, the garden glistens under a thin layer of dew, as if the night laid a shield over what remains. The brass plate sits on my porch wrapped in cloth, the photograph beside it, both waiting for the city's verdict. Collins promised a 24-hour halt, but Karen's posts online are already demanding action. She calls it a victory against disorder. The comments beneath split into war camps, those who want beauty uniform, and those who think beauty is in what survives. By mid-morning, a silver sedan pulls up and Dr. Mara Harlow steps out, hair tied back, fingers already stained with soil from somewhere else. She doesn't waste time with introductions. She kneels in the trench, tracing the plate's inscription with a small brush, letters emerging clean under her touch. She tells me quietly this registry was part of Ordinance 12B, passed in 1943 to protect wartime gardens. Her eyes burn with the thrill of finding something the city's records insisted was lost. Karen appears as if summoned, clipboard in hand, voice sharp. She waves fresh complaints signed by half a dozen neighbors. Rats, allergens, sightline hazards. She says the city can't privilege history over safety. Collins steps between them, reminding her the stop order stands until the hearing. Karen's smile doesn't reach her eyes. She says she's simply keeping the process alive. In the afternoon, the neighborhood hum shifts. I feel it before I see it, a shadow sliding across my yard where no one should be. Leo spots it too, camera already in hand. We catch the shape just as it vanishes behind my shed. Minutes later, smoke curls upward, thin at first, then thicker. My boots hit the dirt before my mind catches up. I tear the door open, heat slamming my face. Seed packets flare like paper lanterns, their careful labels curling into ash. Leo sprays the flames with a small extinguisher I keep by the workbench. The fire dies choking, leaving the air bitter with what's been lost. In the mess, I find the map from my grandmother's tin, its edges scorched but still legible. The 5 stars remain. For other gardens somewhere in the city, still standing or already erased. Denise watches from across the street, arms folded tight, her gaze locked not on the damage but on a map in my hand. Her mouth opens as if she might speak, then closes. She retreats inside without a word. I'm left with the heat of the fire and a question that won't let go. Who would try to burn history before the hearing? If you've ever seen something precious destroyed to protect a lie, you understand what this feels like. Keep this fight alive. Tap like so this doesn't vanish under noise, subscribe so you're here when the city faces the truth, and drop a comment with your city. Tell me if you've seen gardens like this, or if they've already been taken. Dr. Harlow examines the dog tag I found, her brows drawing together. She says the name belongs to a soldier who disappeared returning from the Pacific in 1946, never accounted for. His family lived 3 blocks over until their home was sold under a clause no one will say out loud. The kind of clause that hid behind words like community standards. That night, the phone rings at 3:11 a.m. The voice is cracked, hurried, as if afraid of being overheard. It gives me an address, City Archives, basement, 12B, and a box number before the line goes dead. I sit in the dark, the map spread before me, the address written in my grandmother's looping hand on the back of one envelope. It feels like the ground is pointing me where it wants me to dig next. When morning breaks, I'm already in my truck. The streets are quiet, houses still wrapped in their sleep. At the archives, the clerk hesitates until Collins appears, badge gleaming, and says he's with me. We descend into the smell of dust and metal cabinets, where time lies in neat rows waiting for someone to ask the right question. The box labeled 12B sits heavy on the table. Inside, a ledger records every victory garden in the city during the war, their locations and caretakers' names written in careful ink. My address sits in the fourth slot. Dr. Harlow's fingers tremble as she turns the page to a separate ledger marked Private Covenants, 1950s. The words inside are sharp, ugly, meant to keep people out. One signature repeats across the pages, George Whitfield, Karen's grandfather. The air in the basement turns colder. A door creaks behind us. Denise stands there, pale, holding something wrapped in cloth. She says Karen isn't protecting beauty. She's protecting the story her family built on someone else's absence. She sets the bundle on the table, turns, and walks out, leaving us with the truth pressing down heavier than the ledgers. The bundle Denise left behind feels like it has its own heartbeat. I unwrap it slowly, revealing a faded canvas satchel with initials stitched in one corner. Inside are more letters, brittle with age, some of my grandmother's handwriting, others in a hand I recognize from the 10 Gideon Maze. They speak of planting not just for survival, but for defiance. They describe feeding families turned away from local markets, and of nights when the gardens had to be guarded from those who saw their success as a threat. Dr. Harlow scans a page, her lips tightening. She says these letters are more than personal. They're a record of the exact purpose of the ordinance, proof it was meant to preserve not only the land but the history of who kept it alive. Collins photographs each page, his jaw set like a man adding up a bill he intends to collect. We turn back to the ledger of Private Covenants. The language is cold and deliberate, ensuring certain people could never own homes here, never even rent. The ink from George Whitfield's signature is thick, pressed into the paper as though he wanted to make sure the exclusion would outlive him. Dr. Harlow whispers that this is the missing link, why the ordinance disappeared from enforcement, why the registry was quietly buried. I take out the scorched map from the tin and place it beside the ledger. 4 other stars dot the city. If this garden is at risk, so are the others. Some may already be gone, torn out under the same rules Karen uses. Collins says the city council will need to see all of it, the plate, the photograph, the dog tag, the letters, the covenants. He'll push for an emergency hearing, but warns the HOA will come armed with lawyers and pressure. The archives hum with the sound of the air unit cycling, a small steady noise that somehow feels louder than the truths we've uncovered. I glance at the clock and realize we have less than 2 days until the stop order expires. Dr. Harlow says she'll prepare the historical report tonight. Collins offers to deliver notices to the other garden sites before anyone can move on them. If this fight belongs to more than me, it belongs to everyone who believes the past is worth defending. Tap like so this doesn't get buried in the next news cycle. Subscribe so you can stand with us when the hearing begins, and drop a comment with the name of someone in your family who kept something alive when the world tried to take it. We leave the archives into the cold afternoon, the sky pressing low. At my truck, I find an envelope under the wiper. Inside is a single photograph. Karen as a child, no more than 8, standing in a yard with her mother. Behind them, in black and white, is a lush garden almost identical to mine. The back of the photo is stamped 1982, Victory Garden number 4. The contradiction hits like a sudden wind. I walk the photo to Collins, who studies it, then shakes his head. This means Karen grew up knowing the history she now calls a violation. Dr. Harlow says this isn't just a fight over plants. It's a fight over who gets to claim the past. The more we dig, the more it becomes about truth itself. That night, my porch light flickers. I find a folded note on the step in neat, deliberate handwriting. It says they will not stop at paper. Protect the map. The warning chills me more than the wind. I lock the satchel, the plate, and the photograph in a fireproof box, sliding it under the floorboard where my grandmother once kept her seed jars. Sleep doesn't come. Instead, I trace the lines of the map over and over until I can see the stars even with my eyes closed. Each one is a heartbeat, each one a reminder that the garden is more than roots. It's a chain binding the present to what it cannot be allowed to forget. Somewhere across the street, A light switches off, and the neighborhood sinks into a silence thick with the weight of what's coming. By morning, the hearing notice is taped to my door. Black ink on white paper, summoning us to City Hall. At the bottom, a list of scheduled witnesses. For the HOA's side, the first name is Denise Whitfield. My pulse stutters. She brought us the truth, but now she will speak for them. I don't know yet if she's been forced, if this is a tactic, or if the weight of her family's history is too much to carry in public. Either way, the fight is moving out of the garden and into a room where walls are made of rules. City Hall smells faintly of polish and old paper, the kind of place where history is either preserved or erased depending on who speaks loudest. The chamber is already full when I arrive. Neighbors, reporters, people I've never seen before. The brass plate rests in front of me on the table, the photograph beside it, the dog tag placed carefully on top as if the three pieces know they belong together. Karen sits across the aisle, sharp suit, hair perfectly smoothed, her binder thicker than before. She doesn't look at me, but I can feel her tension like a cold draft. The HOA's lawyer leans in to whisper something to her, and she nods, eyes fixed on the council dais. Denise is 2 seats down from Karen, shoulders rigid, face unreadable. The council calls for the first witness. Karen rises and launches into her speech. Order, safety, uniformity. She lists complaints in precise detail, making them sound like threats to the fabric of the neighborhood. Property values, aesthetics, precedent. Her tone is steady, her pause is calculated. She's done this before. When it's my turn, I speak of my grandmother's garden, of the seeds carried through decades, of the ordinance written to protect them. I hold up the plate, tell them where it was found, what it means. I set the photograph on the projector so the chamber sees the faces of the women and men who stood in that yard when food shortages were real and survival meant cooperation. For a moment, the room is quiet enough to hear my breath. Then they call Denise. She walks slowly to the stand, the weight of something invisible pressing on her. She begins by confirming her family's long history in the neighborhood, then hesitates. Her eyes find mine, and something shifts. She speaks of her father's rules, of the covenants written by her grandfather, of how those documents were used to keep people out while erasing the truth of who built the community's strength. She says Karen is following the same playbook, whether she admits it or not. The HOA lawyer interrupts, objecting to irrelevant personal history, but the council overrules. Denise's voice grows steadier. She admits she signed some of the recent complaints under pressure, that she regrets it, that she knows what my grandmother's garden stood for. Ripple moves through the crowd. Karen's hands tighten on her binder until her knuckles pale. Leo, invited as a witness, plays footage from his live stream on the projector. It shows the early morning tear-out crew arriving before the appeal, Karen directing them to start before Collins arrived. The sound of steel scraping stone fills the chamber, louder than I remember. Gasps ripple across the rows of seats. The HOA lawyer tries to recover, presenting a lien notice for unpaid fines, an attempt to paint me as irresponsible. The document lands on the table with a dull slap. Before the moment can settle, Mr. Calloway stands from the back, a small chain of rusted dog tags in his hand. He walks to the front and sets them beside the plate, saying they belong to the same soldier named in my grandmother's letters. He says he found them years ago, buried under a different garden from the registry, garden number 2, and kept them safe for someone who would understand. If you've been watching this unfold and feel the weight of it, stand with us now. Tap like so the story reaches more eyes than this room holds. Subscribe to follow it past today's vote, and leave a comment with a name you think belongs on a registry that honors those who fed and protected when no one else would. The council looks down the dais, murmurs passing between them. The clerk gathers her notes. The chair announces they will vote immediately, the outcome to be read aloud in the chamber. Karen leans back, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as if already calculating her next move. My pulse hammers in my ears. The clerk stands, holding a folded slip of paper with the results. The room leans forward as if pulled by one breath. My fingers tighten around the edge of the table, the brass plate warm under my palm. The air feels electric, the kind that comes just before a storm breaks. The clerk opens the paper, glances at the chair, and begins to read. The clerk's voice is steady, but every word lands like a stone in still water. The council has voted unanimously to recognize the Victory Garden Registry as a protected historic designation. My plot, along with the 4 others marked on the map, will be preserved under city ordinance. The emergency removal order is nullified, all fines voided. The chamber erupts in a mix of applause and shouts, a release of tension that's been building for weeks. Karen's face does not change, but her grip on the binder loosens. The council chair turns to the HOA representatives and announces that their board will face a formal censure for abuse of enforcement powers. They will be required to attend training on historic protections and equitable compliance, and restitution will be paid for damage already done. The HOA lawyer sits back, his expression blank. I look down at the brass plate, the photograph, and the dog tag resting together on the table. They've gone from buried relics to the heart of a fight the whole city just watched unfold. Dr. Harlow smiles faintly, relief showing in the softening of her shoulders. Collins leans over and says quietly that this is the first time he's seen the council override an HOA this decisively. Outside, the cold air feels sharper, cleaner. People gather on the steps of City Hall, some strangers, some neighbors, thanking me, telling me about gardens their families once kept. Leo's live stream is still rolling, his chat filled with congratulations and stories from viewers in other towns who plan to check their own local ordinances for forgotten protections. If you've been here from the first moment or joined somewhere along the way, you're part of this now. Tap like so the history we fought for today stays visible. Subscribe to follow the rebuild and drop a comment with your city. Let's map every place where a garden still has a story to tell. When I return home, the yard is quiet. The scars from the tear-out remain, but so does the foundation. The city has already scheduled a restoration grant, and volunteers have signed up to help replant. Leo is there with his camera, narrating the first steps toward bringing the garden back. Mr. Calloway arrives carrying a small wooden box. Inside, the dog tags are mounted in a shadow frame beside a photo of the soldier in uniform. He says it's time they were displayed where people can see them. Dr. Harlow places the brass plate at the edge of the walkway, securing it in concrete. She says it will stand long after we're gone, so no one can pretend the garden never existed. Denise walks over at dusk. No clipboard, no tight expression. She doesn't step into the yard but sets a small envelope on the gatepost. Inside is a seed packet, heirloom beans, with a flyer from 1943 folded neatly behind it. The flyer bears her grandfather's signature from a wartime seed drive. She meets my eyes for a moment, nods once, and leaves without speaking. I stand there as the last light fades, holding the packet, feeling the history it carries. The air is cold, but the soil beneath my boots feels warm, as if ready to start again. I kneel at the first empty bed, press my hand flat against the earth, and imagine the roots that will grow here, tying this moment to everyone that came before. A week later, the plaque is installed at the front edge of the garden. People pause to read it on their walks, some taking photos, others leaving small offerings, seeds, flowers, notes. One morning, I find a tiny green loop breaking through the soil in the spot where the fire burned hottest. It's the first sign of new life, stubborn and uninvited, exactly the way my grandmother would have wanted. The fight began with a notice meant to erase, but it ends here with something no order can touch. This garden, and the story it tells, will outlive all of us. And somewhere in the city, for more gardens just woke up knowing they're safe.